Most women, at some point, have felt the subtle weight of unspoken expectations, the silent pressure to conform, to dim their internal light for the comfort of others. Have you ever wondered why the quiet strength of a woman often goes unnoticed until it blossoms into an undeniable force? A force born not from thunderous declarations, but from profound silence? It is in this profound silence that the seeds of self-discovery are often sown. A silent landscape where the true architecture of one's being is constructed, brick by unseen brick. This hidden genesis of power, this transformation from silent suffering to radiant resilience, is the very essence of the strength that builds a woman's smile, a smile forged in the crucible of her deepest internal battles. Imagine Elara, a woman whose life, from the outside, appeared to be a meticulously crafted tapestry of contentment. Her home was immaculate, her career promising, her social circle vibrant. Yet, beneath this polished surface lay a quiet ache, a persistent feeling of being unseen, unheard, a profound disconnect from her authentic self. For years, Elara had perfected the art of appeasement. She was the accommodating daughter, the agreeable friend, the supportive partner. Her opinions often remained unvoiced, her desires subtly reshaped to align with those around her. It wasn't a conscious suppression, not at first. It was a gradual erosion, a slow surrender of her inner landscape to the external demands of her world. She believed this was the path to harmony, the way to maintain the delicate balance of her relationships. But each silent concession, each unexpressed truth, was a tiny chip away from the vibrant core of who she was. One crisp autumn evening, as the last vestiges of twilight clung to the horizon, Elara found herself alone, the familiar hum of the city a distant murmur. A casual comment from a colleague earlier that day, a seemingly innocent jest about her being too agreeable, had struck an unexpected chord. It wasn't the words themselves, but the echo of a truth she had long denied. A wave of profound loneliness washed over her, not the loneliness of physical solitude, but the more insidious kind that comes from being a stranger to oneself. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, a vague outline against the city lights. Who was she truly beneath the layers of expectation and performance? A chilling realization dawned upon her. She didn't know. This moment, this stark confrontation with her own quiet dissolution, was a small, almost imperceptible plot twist in the narrative of her life, a prelude to a deeper awakening. The silence of that evening stretched, profound and unyielding, forcing Elara to confront the unaddressed grievances of her soul. She recalled countless instances where she had nodded in agreement when her spirit screamed dissent, where she had smiled politely when her heart ached with unacknowledged pain. There was the time her partner, Mark, had made a significant decision about their shared future without consulting her, dismissing her concerns with a casual, "I thought you'd be fine with it." She had swallowed her disappointment, offering a weak smile, the words of protest dying on her tongue. Or the family gathering where her brother had openly mocked her artistic aspirations, calling them a fanciful waste of time. Instead of defending her passion, she had merely laughed along, the sting of his words a bitter aftertaste in her mouth. Each of these moments, seemingly minor in isolation, had woven themselves into a thick shroud of unexpressed emotion, a silent archive of her self-betrayals. Elara remembered a particularly vivid incident from her childhood, a moment that had subtly shaped her behavioral patterns. As a young girl, she had poured her heart into a drawing, a vibrant landscape filled with fantastical creatures. She had rushed to show it to her mother, beaming with pride. Her mother, distracted and busy, had glanced at it quickly and said, "That's nice, dear, but why don't you draw something more realistic, something useful?" The words, though not intentionally cruel, had landed with the weight of a decree. Young Elara, in that instant, had learned a silent lesson. Her inner world, her wild imagination, was perhaps not valuable, not useful. From then on, she had unconsciously begun to filter her expressions, to seek external validation for her inner world, stifling her unique voice in pursuit of acceptance. This early childhood experience, though seemingly insignificant, had laid the groundwork for her later pattern of self-silencing. a testament to the powerful influence of early environmental reinforcement, a concept B.F. Skinner might have explored. The emotional atmosphere within Elara that night was one of deep melancholy, a quiet despair that bordered on resignation. Yet, within this despair, a tiny spark of defiance flickered. It was the glimmer of her authentic self, weary but persistent, pushing back against the years of suppression. She began to journal, a simple act, but one that felt revolutionary. In the privacy of her own words, she started to unearth the buried emotions, the unspoken resentments, the long-dormant desires. The initial entries were hesitant, almost apologetic, but with each stroke of the pen, a fragile sense of self began to emerge. It was a slow, arduous process, akin to an archaeological dig, each unearthed feeling a relic of a life unlived. One evening, while reflecting on her tendency to avoid conflict, she recalled a passage from a book she had once read, something that resonated with the ideas of Carl Jung. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Elara had always strived for an idealized version of herself, one that was perpetually agreeable and never ruffled feathers. This striving, she now realized, had been her prison. True change, true growth, could only begin with radical self-acceptance, embracing her shadow self, the parts of her she had deemed unacceptable or inconvenient. The realization was a small climax, a turning point in her internal narrative. As the weeks turned into months, Elara continued her quiet work. She started setting small boundaries, first with herself, then with others. She said no to invitations that didn't genuinely excite her. She voiced her preferences in small, unassuming ways. The initial reactions from others were varied. Some seemed mildly surprised, others slightly confused by this new, subtly assertive Elara. A few, however, responded with genuine respect, recognizing the quiet strength she was beginning to embody. This was her social learning in action, as Albert Bandura might describe it, where her small acts of self-assertion, when met with positive reinforcement, encouraged further steps towards self-actualization. Elara's journey exemplifies the archetypal pure/puella aeternus in its struggle with integration. Initially, she embodies the negative aspects of the pure/puella, clinging to a state of perpetual childlike adaptability and a fear of confronting the complexities of adult individuation. Her fear of conflict, her need for external validation, and her reluctance to embrace her full, authentic self are hallmarks of this archetype. However, as she embarks on her silent journey of self-discovery, she begins the challenging process of moving towards true individuation, integrating her shadow aspects, her unexpressed anger, her suppressed desires, her authentic opinions, into her conscious self. The theme of Elara's story is the profound power of silent self-reclamation. It highlights how years of subtle emotional suppression can lead to a profound disconnect from one's true identity, and how the courage to embrace internal silence can become the fertile ground for genuine transformation. Her character, initially defined by external roles and expectations, gradually reveals a complex, multifaceted individual, capable of profound resilience and self-awareness. For you, the viewer, if you find yourself in Elara's silent struggle, know this. The strength in your smile, the genuine warmth in your eyes, can only truly radiate when it is built on the bedrock of your authentic self, a self unapologetically expressed. Begin by honoring your quiet stirrings. Listen to the whispers of your soul that have been drowned out by the clamor of external demands. What small truths have you suppressed? What desires have you quietly set aside? Embrace the silence not as an empty void, but as a sacred space for introspection. Journal your thoughts, allow yourself to feel uncomfortable emotions without judgment, and practice small acts of self-assertion. Each no to an external demand that doesn't align with your values is a powerful yes to yourself. Each voiced opinion, no matter how small, is a brick in the foundation of your authentic power. Your journey to self-discovery begins not with a grand declaration, but often with the quiet courage to simply be you, fully and truthfully. The silence that birthed Elara's initial self-reclamation was merely the first whisper in a symphony of inner transformation. From the quiet discomfort of suppressed truths, a new layer of her strength began to form, the ability to discern the true reflection of herself, unmarred by the projections of others. This is the subtle art of understanding that the strength in her smile isn't just about internal peace, but also about recognizing and reclaiming the fragmented pieces of herself that others, consciously or unconsciously, have held hostage through their own psychological frameworks. Consider the profound insight offered by Carl Jung when he stated, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." This powerful assertion, often simplified to a mere aphorism, holds a mirror to the intricate dance of ego projection and shadow work that defines so many of our relational struggles. Elara, in her journey, began to encounter moments where the irritation or discomfort she felt towards others wasn't about their inherent flaws, but about the unacknowledged aspects of her own psyche being reflected back at her. After her initial breakthrough, Elara found herself increasingly attuned to the subtle ways in which people's perceptions of her clashed with her nascent sense of self. Mark, her partner, continued to see her as the accommodating, uncomplaining woman he had always known. When she tentatively voiced a differing opinion on a shared financial decision, his immediate reaction was a dismissive chuckle. "Oh, come on, Elara," he'd said. "You always go with the flow. Don't tell me you're suddenly turning into a rebel." The sting of his words wasn't just in the casual dismissal, but in the blatant misrecognition. It was as if he was projecting his established image of her, rather than seeing the evolving woman standing before him. This wasn't necessarily malicious on his part. It was the ingrained habit of his ego projecting its familiar narrative onto her. Elara's internal dialogue during such moments became a crucible for self-awareness. Is this truly who I am? Or is this merely the reflection of his expectation? She began to realize that Mark's perception wasn't a judgment of her worth, but a manifestation of his own comfort with a predictable partner. His irritation, if she pushed back too much, might stem from his own shadow, perhaps a fear of unpredictability or a need for control. This realization was liberating. It allowed her to detach from the emotional charge of his projection and instead observe it with a newfound objectivity. Then there was her sister, Clara, who often cast Elara in the role of the responsible one, implicitly criticizing Elara's desire for creative pursuits. "You always were the sensible one, Elara," Clara would comment, whenever Elara mentioned a new art class or a desire to travel spontaneously. "Good thing someone in this family has their feet on the ground." Elara had always internalized this, believing it a compliment, a badge of honor. But now, through the lens of Jungian thought, she saw it differently. Was Clara projecting her own unconscious yearning for stability, or perhaps her own fear of stepping outside the lines? Elara had spent years trying to embody this sensible persona, believing it was what made her valuable. Yet, it was precisely this persona that stifled her creativity and spontaneity, parts of herself that Clara, perhaps, had relegated to her own shadow. These interactions became less about external validation and more about internal revelation. Each moment of feeling misunderstood, each instance of another person's ego clashing with her emerging self, became an opportunity for deeper shadow work. Elara began to acknowledge her own hidden needs. The need for recognition, the desire to be seen for her multifaceted nature, not just a simplified caricature. She recognized her own tendency to internalize others' projections, to make their narratives her own. This was a crucial step in her individuation process, moving beyond the collective unconscious and developing a distinct, integrated self. Consider the theories of Jean Piaget, particularly his work on cognitive development. While primarily focused on childhood, his concept of assimilation and accommodation offers a powerful metaphor for adult psychological growth, especially in understanding projections. Elara had spent years assimilating others' perceptions into her self-concept, bending her internal reality to fit external frameworks. But now, she was beginning to accommodate, to adjust her internal schema to embrace her authentic self, even if it meant challenging the established narratives held by those around her. This was a challenging cognitive shift, demanding immense internal fortitude. The emotional atmosphere of this phase of Elara's journey shifted from quiet despair to a more complex, yet ultimately empowering, sense of emotional discernment. There were moments of frustration, certainly, when the weight of others' projections felt heavy. But increasingly, these frustrations were interspersed with flashes of clarity, moments of profound self-recognition that felt like tiny, triumphant unveilings. She was learning to separate her true essence from the tangled web of external expectations. She began to observe herself and others with a calm, almost scientific curiosity, like a psychologist analyzing a case study. One day, during a particularly fraught conversation with Mark, where he again tried to define her choices based on his past perceptions, Elara paused. Instead of feeling defensive, she felt a quiet strength. She looked at him, not with resentment, but with an understanding of the pattern at play. "Mark," she said, her voice steady, "I know that's how you've always seen me, and perhaps for a long time that's how I saw myself too. But I'm changing. I'm discovering new parts of myself, and I need you to see them too, not just the woman I used to be." The words hung in the air, a declaration of her emerging truth. It wasn't an accusation, but an invitation for him to adjust his own schema, to accommodate her evolving reality. This was a small, yet significant, plot twist in their relationship dynamic, initiated by Elara's newfound clarity. Her ability to articulate her internal landscape, to express her reality without apology, was a direct result of her diligent self-reflection. She wasn't seeking to control Mark's perception, but to assert her own truth. This was not an act of aggression, but an act of self-love. It mirrored aspects of Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, particularly the challenge of identity versus role confusion extending into adulthood. Elara was actively constructing her identity, moving beyond the roles she had passively accepted, and asserting her authentic self in her relationships. Elara's journey through the labyrinth of ego projection and shadow work reveals the archetypal heroine's journey in its most intimate form. She faced her own internal dragons of the fear of rejection, the comfort of conformity, the desire to be liked, and the external dragons of others' expectations and projections. Her quiet courage in confronting these internal and external forces signifies a profound move towards self-actualization. The theme is the vital importance of self-differentiation within relationships and the liberation that comes from understanding where another's perception ends and your true self begins. Her character, once defined by her adaptability, now emerges as a woman grounded in her own truth, capable of holding her own space even amidst differing views. For you, the viewer, if you recognize the subtle ways in which others project their narratives onto you, or if you find yourself irritated by certain traits in others, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me is being reflected back? What aspect of my own shadow might this be illuminating? True strength isn't just about asserting your will. It's about discerning what is truly yours and what belongs to another's psychological landscape. Embrace the discomfort of being misunderstood, for it is often in that space that your most authentic self is forged. You have the inherent capacity, as Carl Rogers might attest, for self-understanding and for altering your self-concept. Begin to gently challenge the narratives others have spun about you. Speak your truth, not in anger, but in authenticity. Your journey of self-discovery is a dynamic dance, and the most exquisite steps are often taken when you learn to move to the rhythm of your own unadulterated song. Type continue to receive the next part. Continue. The quiet process of reclaiming her internal landscape and understanding the projections of others naturally led Elara to the profound realization that true strength, the kind that radiates from a genuinely peaceful smile, is ultimately built from a deep well of self-compassion and the courage to transform past pain into present power. The final layer of her transformation wasn't about fighting battles, but about forging inner peace through the alchemical process of healing. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. This profound sentiment, often attributed to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, encapsulates the essence of what it means to build strength from silence, to cultivate a smile that speaks volumes of battles won within. It speaks to the core of trauma psychology and modern self-worth, revealing that the journey to authentic happiness is often paved with the very experiences that once threatened to break us. Elara's silent strength had been born from unaddressed pain, from the quiet erosion of her self-worth. Now, she faced the deepest layers of this internal landscape. She began to understand that the need to be agreeable, to suppress her voice, wasn't just a learned behavior from childhood or a response to external projections. It was also a coping mechanism developed to avoid the perceived pain of disapproval, rejection, or conflict. This realization was a significant plot twist in her internal narrative. Her previous attempts at self-preservation had, paradoxically, led to self-diminishment. She remembered a recurring dream from her adolescence, a vivid nightmare where she was in a vast, echoing hall, trying to scream but no sound would come out. It was a terrifying sensation of voicelessness. As a child, she had dismissed it as a simple bad dream. Now, in her quiet moments of reflection, she saw it as a symbolic representation of her shadow, the repressed parts of her psyche, her unexpressed anger, her unfulfilled desires, screaming for release. The process of confronting this dream, not just as a fleeting image but as a deep psychological message, was a crucial piece of her healing. It was an internal dialogue with her younger self, an act of compassionate acknowledgement for the silent suffering she had endured. The concept of stoicism began to resonate deeply with Elara, not in the sense of suppressing emotions, but in understanding what was within her control and what was not. Marcus Aurelius's wisdom, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength," became a guiding principle. She couldn't control how others perceived her, nor could she erase her past experiences. But she could control her response to these things, her interpretation, and her capacity for self-forgiveness and growth. This shift in perspective was like finding a hidden key to a long-locked door within her own mind. Elara consciously embraced practices that fostered inner calm and self-connection. She started walking daily in a nearby park, allowing the rhythm of her footsteps to quiet the incessant chatter of her mind. This wasn't merely physical exercise. It was a moving meditation, a way to ground herself in the present moment, much like the mindfulness practices advocated in many healing psychologies. She also began to practice gentle yoga, finding that the physical postures, combined with focused breath, helped her to release long-held tension in her body, tension that was a physical manifestation of her emotional suppression. These practices were not about achieving perfection, but about cultivating a consistent, compassionate presence with herself. She learned to sit with uncomfortable emotions, the lingering regret, the flashes of anger without judgment, allowing them to pass through her like clouds in the sky. This was her active shadow work, not burying the difficult emotions, but acknowledging them, understanding their origins, and ultimately, integrating them as part of her complex human experience. She discovered that by truly feeling these emotions, they lost their power to control her. The transformation was gradual, yet profound. Her interactions with Mark began to shift, subtly at first. When he made a dismissive comment, instead of a weak smile or internal retreat, Elara found herself capable of a calm, direct response. "I understand that's your perspective, Mark, but my feelings on this are different." There was no aggression, no demand for him to change, only a clear assertion of her own reality. This was a powerful demonstration of her increased self-worth. She no longer needed him to validate her experience for it to be real. The most visible sign of Elara's internal metamorphosis was, indeed, her smile. It was no longer a mask of politeness or a shield against discomfort. It was genuine, rooted in an unshakable inner peace. There was a warmth in her eyes, a subtle knowingness that spoke of battles bravely fought and won within the silent chambers of her own soul. Her presence became more grounded, more magnetic, drawing others towards her not for what she could do for them, but for who she authentically was. This was the culmination of her individuation, a unique, integrated self, radiating from the core. Elara's journey exemplifies the ultimate triumph of the individuated self over the fragmented ego. She moved beyond the shadow of her past wounds and the projections of others to embrace her authentic essence. The theme of her final transformation is the profound alchemy of healing pain into power, demonstrating that self-worth is not granted externally, but forged internally through courageous self-confrontation and compassionate self-acceptance. Her character, once defined by silence born of suppression, now radiates a silence born of profound inner strength and wisdom. For you, the viewer, if Elara's journey resonates with your own, know that the most profound strength you possess lies not in your ability to endure silently, but in your courage to heal. Your past pain is not a burden to be carried, but a raw material from which you can sculpt unparalleled resilience and compassion. Begin to view your vulnerabilities not as weaknesses, but as pathways to deeper understanding of yourself. Engage in practices that nourish your soul, whether it's meditation, creative expression like drawing or writing, mindful movement like yoga or walking, or simply spending time in nature. These aren't luxuries. They are essential acts of self-care that foster your internal power. Embrace the silence within you, not as an absence, but as a space brimming with potential. It is in this stillness that you can truly listen to your inner wisdom, process your past, and envision a future where your smile is an authentic expression of your liberated self. Let go of the need for external validation. Your worth is inherent, not earned. Transform your internal landscape and watch as your external world subtly shifts to reflect the powerful, compassionate, and authentic woman you are becoming. If you find yourself in this story, or if it speaks to you, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment to help our channel feel from you. And if you know someone who needs this video, please send them this video as a necessary share. Thanks for watching. The end.